A few years ago, Sony announced that they were investing heavily into creating live service games, likely inspired by the huge successes of Fortnite, Apex Legends, and especially their own game, Destiny 2. However, as of last year, Sony reduced their target of releasing 12 live service games down to 6 by fiscal year 2025. Their reduction in games is easily explainable. Their live service plan failed miserably, and it failed because of one simple fact. It was motivated by tremendous greed. From the beginning, timing was Sony's fallacy. When Sony announced their live service initiative, the ship was already sailing on the popularity of live service games. By the time any of these games would be ready to release, it would be years too late, with only one exception I'll mention later. For a while now, there have been two consistent live service PlayStation games, which are Gran Turismo 7 and MLB The Show. Aside from these, the only other good live service games associated with Sony and PlayStation for the last few years is Bungie's Destiny 2. Bungie did their best to create a compelling live service game, and it was quite successful. However, within the last year, the head of Bungie announced layoffs at the company right after releasing its last expansion, The Final Shape. Though it released very good reviews, Bungie and by extension Sony needed it to perform better, so laying off Bungie developers was the next step for the companies. Aside from Destiny 2, it would not be until 2024 we would see Sony release another live service game, and boy, it was something? In 2024, we were blessed with a trailer for Concord. Reportedly, it was Herman Hulst's baby, who is currently the PlayStation CEO. So, even though development was hell, it somehow became the game Sony was going to use to take the gaming world by storm. Of course, as we all know, it failed spectacularly. It was not free to play, not a really good game, and had nothing unique about it. It was originally reported Concord cost $200 million to make, but before long that number doubled to $400 million.
You what?
A ridiculous amount for any game. This huge misstep led to the studio's closure and the developers losing their jobs. However, there is a great irony to all this, and it is Helldivers 2. The game was made with care and attention, putting gamers first in many ways. So after this game seemingly came out of nowhere and was a huge success, Sony hopped on board the hype train immediately, advertising it everywhere. Then, in classic Sony fashion, stopped the hype dead in its tracks by requiring gamers to link a PSN account to play on PC, which would basically block many gamers from playing the game in certain countries. Essentially, the most gamer-friendly game became anti-consumer overnight, and it was thanks to Sony. Though the policy was reversed quickly, a lot of damage had been done. Oddly enough, that's it for Sony's released live service games. So, the obvious question must be asked. What the hell happened to everything else? Well, nothing good. Insomniac quietly confirmed they were no longer working on a live service game back in 2022. At the end of 2023, Naughty Dog canceled a multiplayer live service game that they had been working on since allegedly 2020. PlayStation's London studio had been working on a fantasy live service game until it was canceled in 2024, with the studio shutting down right after. Moving on, a studio called Deviation Games had also worked on a live service game, which was canceled in 2023. The studio then shut down in 2024. A live service Twisted Metal game was canceled in 2024 as well. Lastly, Bungie was also allegedly developing Destiny Payback, a third-person looter shooter that was also canceled in 2024. Now recently, Sony announced the cancellation of 2 more live service games in development at Bluepoint Games and Bend Studio. The Bluepoint news is personally hurtful to me and many others, as Bluepoint was the studio that could have been remaking Bloodborne in some way. Bluepoint is great at remastering and remaking games, so remaking Bloodborne, a game that was guaranteed to sell well and make Sony a lot of money, should have been a no-brainer. Ridiculously, Sony wanted Bluepoint, a studio great at remaking games, to tackle a live service God of War game instead. Sadly, the same can be said about Bend Studio, who made Days Gone back in 2019. Over time, Days Gone became quite a hit with fans, but Bend Studio announced in the past year that Sony was not interested in a sequel at all and that nothing could be done, so any plans for a second game were scrapped. Instead, Sony apparently had them start work on a live service game. Once again, Sony's decisions with both these studios are especially horrendous. Instead of having Bluepoint remake any beloved game or have Bend work on a sequel to a game a lot of people liked, Sony chose the greedier path. Because of this, gamers are now left with disappointment, Bluepoint and Bend will likely lay off developers, and more money and time were wasted, all because Sony wanted to dominate the market of live service games. At this point, there are not many more live service games left being officially worked on. Marathon was first teased by Bungie almost 2 years ago, and is yet to have a significant update or release timeframe. Bungie's rumored other game, Gummy Bears, also has no updates. There has also been no news regarding the Horizon MMO or another title called Fair Games. Aside from these, everything else planned has either released, been dead on arrival, or cancelled. When making any live service game, there is a high chance that it's going to fail. Sony must have known this, but pressed on anyway. They were so focused on taking huge risks to make billions that they did not properly manage their studios or look to see where the industry was headed. Obviously, Sony is a company and is in business to make profits, and that's perfectly fine. But it's quite obvious that their live service initiative stemmed from their arrogance and their overzealous desire for money. Developers could have been working on other games and IPs, but instead were required to work for years with nothing to show for it. Sony has lost studios, developers, billions of dollars, and time. Now, there is a price to be paid because of Sony's mistakes. Sadly, it is everyone else who has to pay for Sony's greed. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.